podcast. Test, test, test.
It's an honor and my privilege to introduce Professor Corazza. And you all have in your little book a tremendous list of titles and accolades that you can all read for yourselves. I won't bother you with that. But I wanted to give you three little details so you have, if in case you haven't gone through the list, so you know what to expect. So Professor Corazza is and has been for many years an expert in very complex technologies, to the extent he's been advisor to the European Commission on satellite networks and 5G networks. But he is also very interested in creativity and neuroscience. In 2011, he was a founder of the Marconi Institute for Creativity that has this vision that creative thinking is a necessary activity for the dignity of human beings, and has the mission of developing the science of creative thinking. So that must resonate with a lot of people in this room. And at a more personal level, he is a proponent of the theory of dynamic creativity. That it's a theory that brings in all these various things that over the years we've found to be important for creativity: the person, the process, the product, the context, and everything, in a way that encompasses all of them and accounts for the interactions between them, including something that I reckon might be very useful in the long run for computational creativity and the way we look at our own systems, which is this concept of inconclusiveness when associated to creativity, which wasn't something we had thought of before. So thank you very much, Professor.
Okay, thank you very much for the great introduction. Thanks to Teresa for inviting me. It's my first time here at ICCC, and for sure, I think it will not be the last. Very nice community, so thanks a lot for the invitation. Of course, we have all of the knowledge of the world at our fingertips. You might be accessing to that knowledge in this very moment. Perhaps you're not even listening to me. So to have all these opportunities and to specialize, go deeper and deeper into a single discipline, you should agree it's a waste of opportunity. So crossing boundaries between disciplines is an opportunity not to be missed, but to cross the boundary between engineering and psychology, it's a little too much. I think that makes me a strange animal. Okay, so you're listening to a strange animal. And as was said, in 2011, we founded this Marconi Institute for Creativity as a response to what happened in 2010, the first ICCC conference. Okay, so that was a response, our response to that. We have these three pillars: scientific research, we do education at the University of Bologna, Bologna Business School, and then in companies. And then we have these methodologies that we apply in sessions to generate ideas that have the ambition to become invention disclosures or patents. That's what we do. And we start from definitions, as was done this morning, which I liked very much. So you know the definition of creativity. Okay, so if you look at the literature, you've been using that, of course, throughout the conference, but you look at the literature, you find many different variations, let's say about 50 to 60 different variations. So Mark Ranko and his PhD student, Jaeger, set out to find the common denominator of all these definitions, which turned out to be called the standard definition of creativity. So two requirements in order for us to recognize the existence of creativity: two requirements: originality and effectiveness. Originality is more than novelty. Some of you have used novelty as a criterion. Let's say that originality has a little more than that. Of course, it contains novelty. If something is not new, it cannot be original. But not everything that is new is original. I buy a new Fiat Panda. It's new. Those atoms and molecules have not been used for anything else. It's not an original product. So what you need, and remember that the US Patent Office has three criteria to award the patent, the second of which is an idea, in order to be patentable, cannot be an obvious extension of a previous patent. So non-obviousness, or we could say surprise, is a fundamental requirement for originality. Originality is out of expectations. We don't expect that. So it surprises you when it comes. And you can measure that. Pupil dilation, the eyebrows goes up, and we can use different, of course, physiological also sensors in order to measure the level of originality. And there's a third element, which is perhaps the most critical one for creativity out of computational machines, which is authenticity. An original idea carries a signature. So something to think about. How can we make an idea generated by, for example, an LLM foundational model authentic, a signature, unique in a sense? That only that foundational model could have generated that idea. Then it's authentic. Okay, so this is the most critical one. But not everything that is original is creative. It's not difficult to be original. I could start saying things that don't make sense. They are new. They're surprising. Giovanni is crazy. We paid all this money to bring it, and it's crazy. And it's authentic because nobody's crazy like me. But there is no useness. There is no utility. There is no appropriateness. There is no effectiveness. So we have to cut down on everything that is original, those parts that are effective in terms of our purpose. So I'm bringing in the dimension of purpose, and that depends on the domain. So if it's music, if it's arts, it's going to be probably aesthetics. If it's engineering, might be performance, perhaps power consumption. So it depends on the domain. Effectiveness is domain specific. Originality is domain general. Okay, so that's what everybody agrees upon. Therefore, we challenge it. This definition, originality and effectiveness, is actually static. It's a shot here and now, picture here and now of the recognition by some group somewhere of the originality and effectiveness of an idea. It misses most of the phenomenon. The phenomenon is not static, as you said this morning and also in the introduction. The phenomenon is fundamentally dynamic, and this definition misses most of it. Let me give you a few examples. You know Edison, thousands of patents. He was a coach. He was coaching a team of engineers, and they would come crying to him. Perhaps an intuition of something that could be done, typically with electricity. They would start trying solutions. They would fail, and come crying to him. And he would say, don't cry, because we learned something. It cannot be done that way. The final result, the final emergence of the idea that would become a patent could not have come without this trajectory, which includes failure. It's a super important part of the process. And as a matter of fact, we try to say fail as early as possible, because this repeated mechanism of try and error has to take place. Okay, let's give an example from the arts. You know everything about Vincent. So he was born in 1953. For the first 27 years of his life, he tried to do everything and failed at everything. So the last 10 years of his life, Theo, his brother, says, well, you can draw. Why don't you start trying that? Because you failed in everything else. So he starts to draw, starts to paint. Everything is brown, dark, because he's still in the Netherlands. So he moves to Paris. No, that's not no judgment about the Netherlands weather. Of course, I'm just saying that's the first phase of Vincent van Gogh's works, okay? Moves to Paris after 4 years. So we're talking about the last 6 years of his life. And now he gets in contact with the Impressionists, and then he will move down to Arles and sees the sun. The color changes, and everything that we know about Vincent happens there in a few years. In those very few years, he paints 900 canvases, 900 paintings. How many does he sell during the course of his life? 0 plus 1. 1. 1 out of 900. So if you were to judge the creativity of Van Gogh during the course of his lifetime, in terms of the originality and appreciation of the aesthetics of his work, you would say he failed. And when he was writing to Theo, he would write of himself, I'm a mediocre painter, but I want to improve. And he was never satisfied. So we say during our sessions, we say, avoid early closure. So what happened after his death? Theo brings all the paintings to Paris? No, because Theo dies 6 months after Vincent, syphilis in that case. So if you go to Auvers-sur-Oise, 30 kilometers northwest of Paris, you go up, you climb up the hill, you find the cemetery, you find the two brothers side by side with some flowers in between. So it was not thanks to Theo. Somebody else came in. It's a social cultural process which transcends even the generator of the idea. So Joanna Redman, the wife of Theo, she has all the paintings, she has all the letters that the two brothers exchanged. So she publishes the collection of the letters, she brings the paintings to Paris, and she's attacked by the male critics of art saying, you're trying to make a god out of this unknown painter. And it will take about 40 years for these paintings to start to become as they are today, not only for Vincent, but for all the Impressionists. You have to wait until the 1930s for them to be appreciated. So the recognition of originality effectiveness is a dynamic process. It depends on time, it depends on space, it depends on culture. And even when you have in your hands, like Heinrich Hertz had, wireless communications, he was the first to show that Maxwell was right. The electromagnetic field does not only exist in a static form, not only in a dynamic form like in void in space. Nobody had seen that. It seemed to be a mathematical solution, but who knows if that is true. He proves that. He goes around his lab, he has an oscillator on his side, and he has a ring with two metal balls, and moving in the darkness in this room, he sees little discharges between the two balls. He says, it's true, it propagates. There are no applications, no practical applications. There's no effectiveness. It's a very nice physical phenomenon, but I don't see any use. He's a genius, he's a scientist. He has it in his hands, but we have to wait until Guglielmo Marconi, of course I had to mention Marconi, to find the first idea of using propagation in order to serve purpose, to produce services. So all in all, what I'm telling you is that nobody should be so arrogant to say, I can judge the originality and effectiveness of this idea. And if an idea comes up and everybody agrees, everybody applauds, there's a total agreement, it's not creative. Because everybody sees it here and now. It's perhaps an incremental innovation. But if it is discontinuous, if it is disruptive, it's a projection into the future. And the people that are the largest, they have the largest reputation, the experts will be the ones that are most against that idea. So you have to be criticized. And therefore, you cannot be satisfied by definition of creativity, which requires here and now the recognition of originality and effectiveness. We need something more, and that more is one word, actually, potential. It's a game of potential. There is no guarantee. You're more creative if you're challenging the state of the art. And the higher the level of the challenge, the higher your potential. Potential depends on the person. It depends on how you organize the process. It depends on your resources. It might depend on the tools, which might be computational in the process. But there is no guarantee of success. Otherwise, it's not creativity. It might be problem solving. It might be incremental innovation. It might be following what the competition is doing. It might be industry 4.0, whatever. Everything that we know will happen. That's not creativity. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about doing something which has fundamental risk-taking without a guarantee for success. So that potential sometimes is realized and we are happy. We scored. We want to win the European Cup, so we want to score. But playing soccer is not equal scoring. There's much more. So we might score sometimes, or as we said in the introduction, most of the time, perhaps the ideas that we're looking for do not come up, or if they do, the world is not ready and we'll criticize them and the value will not be seen, perhaps even by ourselves if we are the ones generating those ideas. So we are the ones that kill most of our ideas. We don't believe enough in those ideas because the value is not immediate. But stumbling is part of the process. And it's even sometimes more important than success. If you look at the story of the great minds, the great creators, great inventors, artists, and so on, they become interesting when you start understanding how difficult it was, kind of obstacles that were to, be overcome, and so on. So once you accept that creativity requires not originality and effectiveness here and now, but a potential for that, then the process becomes dynamic. Then the episodes of creativity are concatenated with the past, clearly, but they can last a time which is open-ended, as somebody said this morning, it's indefinite. Both if you don't find anything, you're in a state of creative inconclusiveness, you keep investing, you keep believing in yourself, you believe in the fact that ideas can be found, but even if you achieve something, you can keep investing. We translate that in avoid early closure. Don't be immediately satisfied. If you're satisfied by the first idea that comes, you don't go very far. If you want to go far, you have to be, just like Van Gogh. I mean, he would paint and scrape it off and do it again, do it again. He would take all the outputs from his LLM and would say, no, that's not enough. I want to do another prompt and another one. It's not enough. So keep going until some of your outcomes will come out. And the impact of those outcomes is a projection into alternative futures, plural. Through different mechanisms, I will keep it short. But first of all, estimation of the value of an idea, not judgment, not assessment, not evaluation, but estimation. You cannot be arrogant to say, I'm the judge. No, you're an estimator. If you're good, you extract the maximum value from it. How do you do that? How do we extract the maximum possible value for the same idea? Two different people see different values. It's subjective. It's not a problem. It's not consensus assessment technique. It's the opposite of that. Okay? The real estimation requires you to imagine alternative futures and to project your idea onto those alternative futures. The art of extracting value is to be able to see those conditions for which that idea has the largest possible value. It's dramatically important. Remember what Heraclitus used to say. You remember Heraclitus 2,500 years ago? He told you donkeys prefer garbage to gold. Garbage is better than gold for a donkey. You imagine the conditions for which something like garbage is better than gold. So it doesn't matter what the idea is. The art is of imagining those special conditions for which your idea becomes the best. That can be done by a human, can it be done by a machine? Okay, then your idea becomes part of a process. So it's concatenated into the future. And if somebody in the future, somebody or some machine in the future takes your idea and uses it, and it becomes a fundamental ingredient of that new creativity episode, that changes the value of your past process. So it's dynamic and it can even change the past. And finally, we will learn a new word from biology. We have learned about adaptation, Darwin. New features in organisms come out of mutations or variations in the DNA that brings as a consequence some new part of your body, some new functionality, and that turns out to be a posteriori more fit to the environment, so it's selected. Okay, so that's true, of course, but it's not the most significant part of the evolution of life on Earth. Exaptation takes most of it, which means finding new functionalities for the same DNA, finding new functionalities out of the features that you already have. Like feathers, for example, in birds. Feathers were not evolved, were not an evolution thing to adapt first for thermal regulation of the body temperature in dinosaurs. And then some of those dinosaurs, they reduce their body, they start to flap, and then by exaptation for the same DNA, they start flying. Okay, so different ways in which these creativity episodes are projected into the future. So they form a process which grows exponentially. And therefore it looks like that. And when it looks like that, it's natural to go back and say, well, so when did it start? When did all of this start? At the beginning, essentially, at the beginning. So there is one process. This is what the title points to, because we can go all the way back to hominids, 3.3 million years ago. We have the stone tool industry. But before that, we can recognize creativity in animals. And if you have not seen it, there's a nice book by James Kaufman and wife on animal creativity. You can find creativity in plants. You can find creativity in amoebas, so monocellular beings without any nervous system. They can solve problems, they can solve labyrinths. And you can find creativity in terms of originality and effectiveness, of evolution in inanimate matter. That's how our universe has evolved from the start. Entropy did not grow, order has grown in our universe. Why? Because the second theorem of thermodynamics does not apply to our universe. It's not a closed system at equilibrium, then disorder, entropy would grow, but it's an open system kept away from equilibrium, from this very large spike of energy at the start. But even now, the expansion of the universe is accelerating. The Big Bang is 13.7 billion years ago, so that's not the cause of that. There is dark energy, apparently, the only explanation that we have, still coming into this open system to keep it away from equilibrium. In those conditions, the complex system formed by this matter can produce trajectories which are fundamentally unpredictable and therefore original. And can anything be more effective than our physical reality? I don't think so. So that is creativity in the material layer, once it's kept away from equilibrium. So what I'm telling you is that there are 4 layers, fundamental layers of complexity: the material layer with material creativity, these trajectories which are unpredictable of evolution of matter, and through that, only 13.7 billion years of existence. How many galaxies did we form? 2 trillion galaxies, each galaxy with hundreds of billions of stars, each star potentially with a planetary system around. Order grows. Then there is a biological layer, which sits on the physical layer, but cannot be reduced to that. You cannot reduce one layer to the previous one. And as I told you, you can find creativity, creative behavior in all living beings. Then there's us. We think we are the center of the universe. So that's the only strict sense creativity process. Why? Because we understand intentionality, purpose for us. And then is there any intentionality, any conscience outside of the human species? Then it becomes a little metaphysical. So I will not get into that. But then we created the next layer of complexity based on computational devices, computational creativity, artificial creativity. So as you see in this view of the dynamic universal creative process, computational creativity is fully part of the process as the next step. And all of these layers are concatenated. Nothing would have happened at our level if we didn't have the evolution at the previous levels. And that keeps happening right now. So this idea is not new. Whitehead, who was first a mathematician, he co-authored the Principia Mathematica with Bertrand Russell. Then he moved to London, he wrote some books on education, and then he moved to the States and became a philosopher and produced the process philosophy. What he says is creativity is the ultimate principle of our cosmos. If you think about it, says Alfred, there are only three things that exist. The indefinite multitude of particles, the unity of that indefinite multitude of particles into one reality, which is different instant by instant. What you're living now with your smartphone in your hands is a unique instant. It will never come back to you. Never come back to you. And what is this process of bringing together an infinite multitude of particles to generate something which is truly original and absolutely effective? Creativity. Creativity is what brings together matter and energy to create instant by instant reality. Okay, so that's the cosmological explanation. So who did say for the first time we had a Big Bang, something started sometime, one point, one instant? Who said that? We are in the 1930s. Who could have been? Just, try. Mark Hubble, yes, that's a very good try, actually. So, yeah, I mean, based on data, because there was a mathematician that said it before that, but it was a priest, a Belgian priest, Georges Lemaitre. First of all, in 1927, 2 years before Hubble, he writes a paper, but in French, on a Belgian journal about the expansion of the universe. Nobody reads it, nobody. And 1929, 2 years after that, Hubble comes out with the same result, better data, but same result. And the law of expansion of the universe becomes known as the Hubble law. So nobody knows about Lemaitre. So he's a professor, he has a PhD in physics, of course. He's a priest, but also a PhD in physics. And his professor says, why don't you translate your damn article into English so that perhaps somebody will read it? And he does that, but he omits that paragraph that would have shown that he had the same idea of Hubble before Hubble himself. But 2 years after that, all of that, he releases this book on l'atome primitif and puts out this very discontinuous creative explanation of the start of a universe, when everyone, including Einstein, including all the physicists of the time, believed it was a steady state. Universe was a steady state. No start, no end, with dynamics happening. So new stars are born, stars are collapsing, but essentially steady state. 1949, so 15 years, 16 years after the book comes out, Fred Hoyle, he's a UK physicist, speaking at the BBC, he makes fun of Georges Lemaitre, and he says, it's like a girl coming out of a cake. It's ridiculous. I call it the Big Bang. He calls it the Big Bang. Georges Lemaitre called it l'atome primitif, the primitive atom. So Big Bang is not a serious name. It was a name attached to this idea as a joke. And people keep laughing. They keep laughing because it says, yes, you're a priest. So you put out an hypothesis which is compatible with creation. So it's not true, of course, you're a priest. So, but steady state, that's the real thing. Steady state is the real thing. That's the real explanation, not the Big Bang. The Big Bang is a joke. So we have to wait until 1964, until these two radio astronomists, Wilson and Penzias in California, they built this very large horn antenna, it's called horn antenna, to look into the depths of the universe, trying to look for extraterrestrial life. So they, spend a lot of money, they start listening, and there's this noise. So we spent all this money, it doesn't work. They go inside the antenna, they look for bird's nest. It's not there. So it's not working. But then the intuition comes up. It's not really disturbance. We are measuring something, and that something was the cosmic microwave background radiation, which is essentially the noise coming out of the Big Bang. After about 300 million years from the start, the photons now, the density of the photons is now small enough for them to start traveling. And it would take 13.7 billion years to arrive at the point where we are, which is about 2/3 from the center of the universe. So that justifies the Big Bang hypothesis. And from there on, everybody speaks about the Big Bang as the truth, or the best theory that we have so far. George was still alive. He died in 1966, so at least he got that satisfaction. So the inconclusiveness was resolved into an achievement after about 30 years from the idea, when the idea was born. And 5 years ago, the European Space Agency sent, not only the European Space Agency, but the International Astronomical Association changed the name of the Hubble law into the Hubble-Lemaitre law. Okay, so what happens after that? So 4.55 billion years ago, the sun, our star, is born. And as it's born and it starts, to rotate, there's this disk of material around it with a density which is sufficient to form planets. So the formation of the solar system is almost right away, right after the planets. So our Earth has about the same age of the sun. By the way, the sun, the estimated life of the sun is only 13 billion years. So we already burned a third of that. So think about it. When you waste time, there's no time to waste. So the Earth was born, but that's not enough for life. That's not enough to justify creativity, to understand us, okay? So we need something else. So when we look for extraterrestrial life, we look for a combination of a planet and a moon. Without the moon, we would not exist. The moon is fundamental. Why? First of all, how was the moon born? There are 6, 7 hypotheses, but the most accredited one is this. So there was a giant impact between the proto-Earth, just formed, so very, very malleable still, with a small planet called Theia. And out of that collision, we had the Earth that solidified, and then the moon, the satellite around it, which is very much locked by gravitation, so that we always see the same face of the moon due to the very strong lock to gravitation. But through that impact, another effect was that our axis of rotation was inclined. So the inclination of the axis is very important for several reasons. First of all, if you add no inclination, there would be no seasons, and therefore no midsummer. So the worst consequence of not having a moon is that you will not know what to do tomorrow. The other thing is the fact that now, the most important thing is that now life, which is born in water, because you need the mobility for the particles to collide and to form the first organisms, it would not have been able to move from the sea to the land. The fact that life is born in water, but then becomes terrestrial, is only thanks to the tides. Because through the tides, you carry all these living beings on the ground, and then you come back, and then you bring it and come back. And through some hundreds of millions of years, some of these beings that remain on the sand, they learn to breathe, essentially. And so life can start. So life started after that. I will jump a few steps. We are, let's say, the hominids come after that revolution. 10 million years ago, we live in Africa. Everything starts from Africa, but something happens there. A creative event from the material layer. So the two plaques underneath Africa, the Western and Eastern plaques, they move far away from one another, causing a great depression from Lebanon to South Africa, about 10,000 kilometers. New mountain reels are formed, new lakes, and these new mountains, now they changed the climate. Climate change was already a problem 10 million years ago. And what happens is that the fronts coming from the ocean are now slowed down. And before that, we were living in forests. We were eating fruits and roots, very excellent diet. But after that event, less rain, so the trees become more sparse, the savanna comes up, and we have a problem. There's not enough food anymore for everyone. So we have a problem to solve as a community. It's a social cultural problem to solve. There's not enough food. What do we do? Somebody has a creative idea. This continues. Let's hunt. Bad idea, say the expert. We are slow. We're weak. The competition has been doing that for years. We will be eaten alive, literally, eaten alive. Somebody says, okay, yes, that's true. We don't know how to do that, but perhaps we could stand up on 2 feet. Bad idea, say the expert, because you have to reorganize your body. The channel for giving birth becomes narrower, so it's more, it's more difficult. The vital organs are exposed. It's easier to kill you. Your joints wear out more quickly because you stand on 2 points instead of 4. But the worst characteristic of this creative idea that you convince any good manager to throw it in the waste is that it takes 12 months to learn. To stand up, a few steps, 12 months. We are absolutely the slowest species. Other species, in 3 days, they're gone. Some species lay eggs and they leave, and the children will never see their parents. We are absolutely the slowest ones. But every idea, every discontinuous idea has negative aspects. So the art of estimating the value of an idea requires you to be the first to see the negative sides, but also prove to yourself and then lead others to see the positive values that overcome the negatives. And what are the positives? Well, we stand up, yes, we are weak, but we see far, so we can anticipate the moves of the lion. Now we can wade waters. We can colonize different parts of the earth, which were forbidden to us before. And we are the only species, today we can say, unfortunately, that colonize all of the earth. Only one. Now we can walk, we can run, we can jump, we can dance. You can dance with artificial intelligence creating movement. So we can diversify. But the most important advantage, which changed completely our evolution, is that now we have free hands. Nothing would have happened without free hands. No stone tools, no musical instruments, nothing, no computational creativity, no touch screen, no text messaging without free hands. Nothing. Okay, so that starts our civilization, and Anthropocene is the era of models. What is a model? It's a simplified representation of reality. So we start doing that with the 6 dimensions, simple, functional, so it has some functionality. It's abstract, and we can have different levels of abstraction. We can build hierarchies of models. We can explain it to ourselves and to others so that you can create something that can be reused by somebody else. It can be transferred. Once you understand it, it's functional. You can extend it, and then you can combine them. I know that many of these concepts resonate with what you do. So let's see very quickly a few models that we have created since the start. So the first one was the stone tool. It's a model of what? It's a model of the arm of the lion. So now we can, eat meat just like the lion does. And as soon as the new GPT, general purpose technology, as soon as a new GPT comes in, somebody says, this is the end of the world. We will not be able to use our nails anymore. We will lose our nails if we use those stone tools. Don't use them. It's dangerous. It's the end of humanity. Okay, so that was the first. Second step, 2.3 million years ago, we start to be able to make fire, control fire. This is a model of what? Fire is a model of the sun. So first of all, temperature. We can warm us up, and again, that's fundamental to colonize different latitudes. Then you can scare animals with that. But the most important advantage of controlling fire is that now we can cook. So Italian cuisine. Cooking means that you can eat food which is easy to digest. And therefore, if you don't chew all the time, because now you eat food which is pre-digested, you can think. And so you can find on Science this article which has this funny title, Exchanging the Energy that we would spend in chewing for thinking, food for thought. And it's thanks to that, after the hands are free, we learn to control fire. We don't chew anymore because it's easy to digest. Our brain and therefore our skull start to grow. So to the ladies in the room, the channel becomes smaller, the head becomes larger. You combine these two elements to produce a need to throw out the baby as soon as possible. So our babies are not mature. All of the organs are complete with one exception, the brain. The brain is incomplete in the moment we are born. It's full of neurons. We got all of them essentially, but very poor in synapses. We have no connections between neurons. So the synapses are born through a process of synaptogenesis, and we have a peak of synaptic density at 2 years old. And therefore, the synapses that we will use will be selected and reinforced through myelin. The ones that we don't use because we produce them in excess, they will be pruned out. Our brains are shaped by experience, not by genetic inheritance. Of course, there are genetic characteristics, but the fundamental way in which we think, for example, our mother tongue, depends on the environment in which we are born. Okay, let's go. Language, therefore, language is fundamental. It's a model of the world. Through language, you can model everything. It's simple, it's abstract, it can be combined, it's extendable, it's also translatable. So first music, proto-music, and then proto-language and language. Where is it born? Not thanks to the one who's outside hunting, but given that the baby is very slow and takes a lot of time for, childhood is very, very long, there's a very strong relationship between the mother and the child. In that relationship between mother and child, proto-music, music, proto-language, language are born. And what would the experts say against language? Could anybody say something against language? We will forget how to sing. Because first, we had those sounds like animals, and we would understand through the sound. But now it's words, so it's not as good. The way we speak shapes our cognition. It's not neutral. The language that you use shapes the way we think. Okay, I have to go a little faster. So take those words and now put them on, not paper, but on clay. Coding starts 6,000 years before Christ. So we start coding, and through that, now you can remember without direct contact. So our culture now can be transferred without direct contact through generations. And people will say, now we will forget how to speak because people will only read that. Okay, let's jump 1439 take printing as a form of automated, large-scale writing on clay. It's a great idea. People are not satisfied because now everyone will be able to have a book. Before it was power. Book equals powers. Books equals power. Now it can be given to everyone. So in some part of the ex-Roman Empire, say the Oriental part, this machine is considered to be the devil. For 300 years, it was banned out. So you have to wait until the 1700 in order for certain parts of the world to allow printing. Electricity is a good idea, second industrial revolution, but again, the devil. Why? Because now we will work at night. There's no night anymore. So it's very bad. Miniaturization, transistor, Second World War. So now you know that your electrical dopamine stimulator has a computational capacity which is larger than the one that brought us to the moon. Thanks to miniaturization, everyone can have a computer. Now we can build computer networks and put all of our knowledge on databases which are linked through hyperlinks. So all of that knowledge that we have developed now is accessible to everyone, everywhere, irrespective of your conditions. And now we can train a neural network to learn everything, and no human can do that. So you can take all of the knowledge and use it to train a GPT now in the sense of generative pre-trained transformer. Okay, well, let me see the time. Botanic digression. So let's talk about plants a little bit, because so far we've talked about humans. So 99.9% of the biomass on Earth is vegetation, plants. So if the extraterrestrials come in, they look at the Earth from outside, they say it's plants. And there's some animals some there, okay, here and there. The oldest living creature is a tree. The tallest creature is a tree. The largest creature is a tree. The fastest creature is a flower. The fastest creature is a flower. The Cornus canadensis explodes and sends this pollen at a speed that comes out from the flower. A speed is 3 times that of a bullet leaving a gun. So the fastest creature on Earth is a plant. And the most deceitful are flowers, orchids that can, for example, allure the male bee by reproducing not only the shape, not only the colors, but also the feel and the smell of the female bee in order for the male to come and try to do its thing. How do they do all that? Okay, we can spend more time on that, but the answer is a little unsettling. They do that because they are not individuals. Think about your life. When something is dangerous, what do? What do all animals do? We run away. But if you're a plant, you have roots, cannot run away. You have to solve the problem. You have to deal with danger. Now, if you have danger and you are rooted down, it's not a good idea to have organs. It's a very bad idea. 1 heart, 2 eyes, 2 lungs. You cut a little bit of that and you're done. So it's much better to distribute your architecture and repeat all the functionalities everywhere. So you can cut a part of the plant and be divided. So it's not individual, it can be divided and still live. It's a distributed architecture. And through these networks of cells, biological cells, it can perform signal processing. And therefore, all of the functions that we do with organs, you can do it with those tissues. Also, we can do it with other parts which are not the brain. What do? They don't exchange neurotransmitters, of course. They exchange ions of calcium, typically. So it's slower, but totally similar to a neural network. But they are plants. So if you want to learn more about all of this, it's magic. Maria. Follow Maria, and you will learn more about that. So back to machines. Artificial intelligence is not a single algorithm. It's not a single device. It's not a single robot. It's a network of sensors taking data, we elaborate data, we distribute the knowledge, we repeat the knowledge. There's no single organ to cut. There's no single plug to pull. So it's not only an imitation of human intelligence, but also an imitation of plants' intelligence. So I propose this new acronym, okay? Psychobiological intelligence. Okay. So we use, in the collaboration between the psychosocial layer and the artificial layer, we can offer, as we've seen this morning very well in a very nice session, artificial intelligence tools to co-create, or first as just a simple tool, or then co-create, or then let it also create autonomously. Now, this study, which is submitted on the JOCB, so the Journal of Creative Behavior, is under review, so you cannot see this, it's confidential. But now you've seen it, so you will have to die. I'm sorry about that. So just to tell you what we've done, we have measured for the human side, of course, the 5 characteristics of personality, the big 5, the ocean: openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. We have measured the self-beliefs. Where is Katerina? We talked about self-beliefs. So the fact that you believe in yourself as a creator, you believe that you're able to be creative. We measured activity without and with artificial intelligence, and we measured creative achievement. Also, on a side, we measured how much you trust AI. The results are not encouraging in terms of the fact that you can even have negative correlations between what you believe and the achievement. So the use of artificial intelligence in general lowers your belief in yourself as a creator and your perception of self-efficacy, and it can even diminish your activity, in the end, your achievement. Of course, the more you trust, there's a positive link to creative activity. And also in terms of personality, in the natural creativity, openness is fundamental. When you use artificial intelligence, openness is not important anymore. It's much more important to be very conscientious in the way you use it, and agreeable, so that you're following essentially what others are doing. But these results are December 2023, so they're old. Things change every few months now. And also, everything that was said this morning about the way in which we can help the interaction between the human and the machine is not taken into account here. So you can use anyone that is working on co-creativity, you can use this result as a starting point to prove that through your approaches, you can move away from these negative results and show that now artificial intelligence can be useful. Okay, so how much time do I have? A few minutes. First of all, the World Economic Forum says we are in trouble. 44% of humanity needs to be upskilled or reskilled. What we have taught in school and university, what they have learned on the job is not sufficient anymore. We need to reskill them. And what do we need to teach them? Number 1, only look at number 1, creativity. So the World Economic Forum recognizes that we need the human side to be creative, perhaps in collaboration with the machine. So how do we develop the human creativity? We have our own model for the creative process. We have dedicated that to Da Vinci. It's a good idea because it's the only Homo sapiens that was able to be creative in more than 20 different disciplines in the arts, science, and technology. Only Leonardo da Vinci. But then Da Vinci also becomes an acronym that allows you to memorize the mental states that go into the process. I'm not going to go into the details. I just want to say, through the 3 days, every time I was thinking, so this applies to this part, this component of the process. So once you have a clear idea of how the entire process goes, for example, the drive, the choice of the focus, the alternative definitions of your focus, you could design an artificial intelligence help assistant for focusing. Of course, you can design artificial intelligence to allow you to have more relevant information on any topic. We've seen several presentations on the inspiration part, some presentations on the novelty generation, a little bit on the creativity estimation, and I would say probably nothing on the divergent creativity estimation, except there was one of your presentations that was talking about serendipity, because if you diverge with respect to your initial goal, you're looking for the value of the idea outside of your initial goal, you're divergent in your creativity estimation, you could find that the idea you generated is not related to your initial problem. Serendipity, okay? So you can model that too, and then you can prototype and implement. So the only job that is left is, first of all, guide to social events in Grana, and the other one is the creativepreneur. So it doesn't make sense anymore for anyone to be an employee. We all tend to become more entrepreneurial, taking the decisions, risking, generating ideas, the value of which is not obvious a priori. So we do it creatively. We can exploit artificial intelligence, but the ethical dimension has to come in for the benefit of humanity and for the benefit of the entire ICCC. Thank you very much. Okay, so don't let me go back to Italy without questions, even though it's already 3 o'clock. Please.
Anyone know how this works?
Also want the microphone to work. But it's, it's an object, it's a symbol. The power is in your hands. It's working.
Thank you. So the results you showed with your systems analysis there, you said it was a negative result. It wasn't exactly clear to me what you meant by that, because what those numbers actually say is there is no connection between any of those boxes that's worth speaking of, right?
Okay, no.
No, it does. It says there's little or no correlation between any of the boxes, very certainly.
Well, okay, so the stars, these are significant.
Yes.
And when you see 0.2, 0.3 from a statistical point of view, it's already good.
No, that's not correct. What that says is those stars say that it is very significant that there is very little correlation.
Well, but that's not little in terms of psychological studies of creativity. These are the order of magnitude of the numbers that we always find.
I understand what Pearson correlation is.
Yeah,
I understand what Pearson correlation is. What I'm trying to get at is what you mean by
they are not small. They are not small. Okay, some of that.
There's one there that's 5.66. We would normally expect 60 to 70%, right? 0.6, 0.7 to say there was a decent correlation in psychology.
No. Okay, anyway, so we can discuss that, but okay, so you're saying there is nothing here, okay?
Well, no. What I'm saying is it's showing that there is no connection between the boxes, which is not a negative result.
Okay, but it's not. That's not the way we interpret that. So we will see what the reviewers and the editors think. Okay, so thank you for the observation. But as we know, the experts will have a negative reaction. So that shows you're a great expert.
Sir, this is mathematical fact from psychology.
Right.
Now, if you don't interpret the numbers correctly, what response do you expect? Huh?
Okay, well, I can give you the paper and you can read it, and then we can discuss it.
Okay. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
I have a question. I was very impressed. We've been working on computational creativity, trying to build models of processes that are not usually considered creative for a long time. And we always consider that these things can be evaluated on the spot. So these ideas that you're presenting here, these things, the creativity is very often, let's say, not apparent at all within the lifetime of the creator is very surprising.
We have many examples of that.
Is there
so the time dimension?
But it doesn't always happen, right? Does it? Yeah. Would you allow for a certain creativity that is measurable, so to speak, or appreciable on the spot?
Right, of course. First of all, any performative action, you know, you have to appreciate that on the spot, right? It's happening in real time. So that you, but then the effect that it has over time, as you remember it, and the interpretation that you give can still change. So it's a process. So what I'm saying is that when we aid the process through tools, we try to make it very quick. So the suggestion is try to see what happens by slowing down. Allow more time, allow incubation on the human side, okay? So because that is shown as a correlation, 0.3 of correlation, the incubation, so the longer you spend, time you spend before you actually generate ideas, correlates positively with creative achievement in that order of magnitude. So to speed up the process through a tool that removes blocks is not necessarily positive. So what about inserting reflection into computational creativity? I don't know if it's a direction to look at, but I think it's new in a sense.
No, there has been work on that,
Okay.
and there's been it is identified as a possible way to go forward, and not one that neural systems are particularly good at. Also, there's another thing I wanted to ask: is
There are also
questions.
sorry.
No, it's beginning to move. Good.
Thank you for this great talk. I had a question concerning the different layers, so the biological and psychosocial layer that you've been talking about, and I think you've been equating kind of the human with the psychosocial layer. So I would be curious how you can and you showed some example of how plants can be creative in different ways. Can you maybe expand a little bit on how we can, because I'm thinking, for example, of ants or for like other species that can have some form of social creativity. So how would you see ways of exploring psychosocial creativity in other species than human, and how do you see these related?
Right. We call it biological, but it's a social. And as I said, there are books on that. There's a literature on that. I could show you, for example, the creativity. You might have seen a video on YouTube on crows in Tokyo. They have the problem of cracking nuts, and they live in Tokyo. So the first idea that comes is drop it on the street, and the cars run over it, and they open it. But then there's another problem that comes in, you know, because the car is still running. So the second level, avoid early closure, the second level of creativity of the crow is to drop it on pedestrian crossings. So the car runs over that, and then when the light turns green, they go and fetch it, okay? So that's an example in crows. There are examples with black swans that cover the water with their wings, and that attracts the fish. So it's a second level of exaptation. You use feathers for another scope, for another functionality. So there are many. Okay, so many.
Thanks for your talk. I wanted to get into, I felt there's a sort of paradox, or let's just say there are contradictions that arise in the way that you presented your overview of creativity, and the story you tell sort of starts from the human and works its way out, and you introduce usefulness, and then we rewind all the way back to the Big Bang and nature, right? And we're still using the same terminology. Absolutely, yes. Of usefulness, and in the way you told the story, which was very entertaining, I enjoyed that very much. But particularly when we got to the point of the humans deciding to hunt, and this was, I mean, strange thing to say, but it was anthropomorphized, in the sense that you inserted intention into a process that's entirely unintentional. Terms like usefulness can have absolutely no meaning, even for an evolutionary biologist. So I just wanted to unpack that. You seem to sort of set this very high bar for what creativity is at the beginning, that we need to include an extra criterion. And then as the narrative continued, we actually end up with an incredibly low bar, that any dynamic process is creative.
Okay.
My question is, are you a techno-optimist?
No, okay. So the answer to that is yes and no, of course. I'm an engineer and a psychologist in a sense. Okay, so yes and no, but the fact that you can recognize unpredictable trajectories of evolution in biology and in physics, and we have some colleagues in La Sapienza, for example, they're physicists and they work on creativity, does not mean that we're going lower, because I don't consider humanity as the ultimate evolution in the universe. So, but there are differences. So in that table, we had strict sense and wide sense. So it's wide sense because we don't recognize purpose and intentionality in the evolution of matter or biology, whereas we are able consciously to say that we have intentionality. Of course, free will in humanity is also a topic for discussion. So is it real intentionality? It's a long discussion. But so I recognize the same distinction as you do, but still there's a fil rouge that interconnects all the layers. So that is the idea.
Okay, sorry, I know there's more questions, but I'm told we have no more time. We have to get moving for the social program. So thank you very much.